What happened when she won an Oscar after working as an actress while hiding her past as a criminal for 18 years? Actress Jessica Chastain, who reached the top and even won the Academy Award for Best Actress, despite having confessed to committing theft for many years. In Korea, she is also known by the nickname Goddess Cha. But in reality, from the moment she was born, Jessica was placed in an environment where she could not have a normal life, a different life from the start. When Jessica came into the world, her biological mother was only 16 years old. Her father was also a 17-year-old high school student. At such a young age, they didn't just have a daughter, but shortly after, they had a younger brother for Jessica. However, faced with these two young children, one day her father made a bombshell declaration. "I can't live like this. My dream has always been to be a rock singer." Leaving only those words behind, her father left home forever. Suddenly, the 16-year-old mother was left all alone. In an era without computers, the things a teenager who had only finished middle school could do were extremely limited. As time went by, their poverty and hunger deepened, and Jessica's mother, reaching her breaking point, ended up having a terrible idea she never should have had. Taking her two elementary school-aged children with her, she decided to commit crimes. Survival that began with theft. Their life of crime started with theft. Her mother would take Jessica and her brother by the hand, go to the supermarket, and steal groceries little by little. The family, who until then could barely afford to eat cereal, was finally able to have real meals. However, shortly after they started stealing, a shocking truth was revealed to young Jessica. It turned out that the supermarket owner had known about the family's situation from the very beginning, but pretended not to notice and turned a blind eye to it. Upon discovering this, Jessica froze, and it is said that when she returned home, she clung to her mother and cried bitterly. Despite her young age, shame and humiliation washed over her entire body. The hell that began at school. But not everyone in the world was as kind as that supermarket owner. The cruelest people to Jessica were not adults. They were students her own age. It reached its peak during high school. How poor do you have to be to always wear those old shoes? How can someone be so ugly? They belittled her poverty and mocked her appearance. But the phrase that left the deepest wound in Jessica was something else. Nobody wants to be your friend. For a teenager, school is their entire universe. Those words made her feel as if she were being rejected by the whole world. The banana peel incident. Plunged into deep pessimism, Jessica ended up committing an unbelievable act in front of everyone. It is known as the banana incident. One day at lunchtime when bananas were served, Jessica, with the desire for people to look at me, started acting bizarrely. She peeled the banana, threw the fruit away, and holding only the peel, began to chew it eagerly, as if it were delicious. As expected, the children gathered around her. If I could just exchange a few words with them, if this could be a chance for us to become friends. Jessica was willing to eat peels or whatever else came her way, ready to be the clown as much as necessary. But the result was exactly the opposite. How much of a beggar does she have to be to eat even the banana peel? From that day on, Jessica was branded with an irrecoverable stigma. In the end, with less than a year left to graduate, Jessica ended up dropping out of school, destiny found in loneliness. After leaving school, Jessica lived in terrible loneliness, having only books for company. However, it was exactly this period that changed Jessica's life. Among the countless books, she fell deeply in love with the works of Shakespeare. Reading Shakespeare's texts written in play format, she naturally opened her eyes to the theater, and especially upon reading Romeo and Juliet, was overcome by a burning desire to one day act in the play. From that moment on, Jessica's miracle began. With the determination to major in theater, she took the GED and obtained her high school diploma, starting at a 2-year community college and transferring from institution to institution until finally she managed to get into the most prestigious university in this field, the Juilliard School, and with a full scholarship. Swarforden, the helping hand of Robin Williams. The person who granted this scholarship was also special. It was none other than the legendary Hollywood actor, Robin Williams. Being a Juilliard alumnus, Robin Williams said that the memory of having to write letters everywhere asking to borrow money to pay tuition during his student days was very painful. So he offered to choose and support just one student, the most financially in need among the freshmen. And the one he chose was exactly Jessica. Thanks to this, Jessica was able to receive professional acting classes sponsored by Robin Williams without any worries about money. Tragic news before graduation. However, with only a few days left until graduation, Jessica received an unbelievable phone call. Her younger sister had been found dead in a man's house. Almost out of her mind and with trembling hands, Jessica called several places to find out what had happened. And then she discovered a shocking truth. The house where her sister's body was found was the house of their biological father, the one who had abandoned the family when they were children, saying he was going to be a rock singer. Unlike Jessica, her sister hadn't told her older sister, had searched for and found their father on her own, and had been living with him until the day of her death. And on that day, her sister turned a gun on herself, at 24 years of age. Lingering doubts. To Jessica, all the circumstances were suspicious. If she sought him out because she missed her father, it was strange that she would take her own life just a few days after arriving there. And if it was an extreme act of revenge against their father, it made no sense why she hadn't shot him, but only killed herself. In the end, after piecing together various facts, she discovered that her sister had been suffering from depression and drug addiction for many years. Probably upon reaching her mental limit, she sought out their father as a last resort, but realizing that nothing would change even after finding him, she lost all hope and pulled the trigger. Imagining her sister's tragic end, Jessica felt an indescribable desolation and couldn't stop crying, overcome by terrible regret and guilt. If only I had called more often to see how she was doing. Although she discovered her father's whereabouts because of her sister's death, Jessica never contacted him again after that. About 10 years later, when their father passed away from a sudden illness at 55, Jessica didn't even attend the funeral. Another hell, the hotel room audition. Before the pain of losing her sister had even passed, Jessica went through another terrible experience that would leave her with lifelong trauma. This happened right after she graduated from college, when she went to her first casting audition. Jessica received a direct call from a film director. "You are a candidate we are keeping a special eye on. Please come in for an audition." Since the director himself had reached out, she felt proud, thinking she was very promising, and went to the audition location fully prepared. However, upon arriving at the address, the location was a hotel. The director must be so busy that he's rushing through auditions at the hotel where he's staying. She thought to herself, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. After taking a deep breath and knocking on the door, the director himself came out to greet her. Inside the room, there was only a solitary camera. The director asked a few simple questions and suddenly handed her provocative clothes and asked her to change. Then he gave her a highly sexual script and pressed the record button. He asked her to act out the intimate scenes from the script with him. As a young newcomer to the industry and an unknown actress with no experience, Jessica thought that, since it was an audition for a romance film, this might be normal, and did as she was told without suspecting a thing. And the next day, the result was a rejection, the Harvey Weinstein method. In fact, at that time, these shameless atrocities against unknown actresses were frequent. There were even terrifying rumors that the tapes recorded in this way were passed around among industry professionals. This method of calling someone to a hotel room for an audition is known as the Harvey Weinstein method. Harvey Weinstein is a criminal of his era who used his immense power in the film industry to exploit countless women with this hotel room method for a staggering 30 years. Currently, he is serving what is, in practice, a life sentence. With the spread of the Weinstein method, a bizarre tip circulated among actors that, if it's an audition in a hotel room, you must look at the director with the most seductive gaze possible to get cast. Among the actresses who suffered similar abuses is Kaya Scodelario, famous for the series Skins. When she made it as one of the 2 finalists for a major film, the director told her the following: "I will give the role to whoever takes all her clothes off first right here." This was despite it being a film that didn't even have a single nude scene to begin with. Kaya Scodelario stormed out of the place in a fury, and the role went to another actress. Later, when established actresses like Jessica Chastain, Meryl Streep, and Natalie Portman began to raise their voices, these wrongful practices started to disappear one by one, Today, the official guidelines of the U.S. Screen Actors Guild have, as their #1 rule, never hold auditions in hotel rooms or private residences. The fateful encounter with Al Pacino. There was someone who pulled Jessica out of rock bottom when she was in a deep lethargy due to her trauma. It was none other than the actor who became a legend with the Godfather series, Al Pacino. At the time, Al Pacino had temporarily stepped away from film and was producing a stage play. In this play, which was a reinterpretation of a famous 19th century story, there was a corrupt and seductive villainess who did not hesitate to commit brutal murders to satisfy her desires. It was exactly for this role that Jessica auditioned. Thanks to the fact that it was a period piece and not a contemporary one, Jessica, who was an ardent fan of Shakespeare, felt quite confident about the audition. However, when the audition actually began, the moment she saw Al Pacino sitting at the judge's table, she broke into a cold sweat. Just a few seconds after she started acting with a racing heart, Al Pacino jumped to his feet and applauded her enthusiastically, shouting, "Why are you only showing up now?" He stood up and started clapping even before the audition was over. That was how Jessica, an unknown actress in her 30s at the time, was chosen as the lead in this play. The Dance of the Seven Veils, one twist after another. However, the joy of being chosen for the lead role was short-lived. Upon receiving the full script, Jessica trembled with a cold feeling of betrayal. The character she would play had to be completely naked on stage. Her old trauma resurfaced and a deep depression took over her with the thought, "I've been fooled by directors' tricks again." But this thought didn't last long. While researching the original 19th century work, she discovered that the scene in question was, from the very beginning, a crucial scene in the original play. It was the Dance of the Seven Veils, a classic theater scene in which a woman dances while taking off 7 layers of fine fabrics, one by one, to seduce the king, until in the end, she is left with nothing, enchanting any king who saw her. It was a traditional scene that countless actresses had already performed. Furthermore, Al Pacino called Jessica aside privately and told her the following, "You don't have to actually be naked. You can wear tights or a skin-colored bodysuit." Upon hearing this, Jessica fully realized that it had been a misunderstanding on her part, and instead took the initiative and declared, "For the artistic integrity of the work, I must truly be naked in this scene." Thus, Jessica decided to do her first live nude performance. Jessica's Dance of the Seven Veils provoked a breathtaking reaction. Faced with such a seductive and yet elegant figure from which one could not look away, questions poured in. Who is that actress? This rumor quickly spread throughout the film industry, and Jessica finally made her entrance into the world of cinema. An explosion of invitations distinguishing characters with perfumes. With an explosion of invitations, Jessica ended up filming an impressive 6 movies in just 1 year. However, an unexpected side effect arose. She began to confuse the characters she played in each project. For Jessica, who only left anonymity in her 30s, roles poured in for women in the same age group, such as mothers and wealthy madames, who, although they seemed similar on the outside, had subtly different personalities and ways of speaking. The brilliant idea Jessica had to solve this was to assign a different perfume to each character. When playing a caring mother, she wore a warm orange scent. When playing a wealthy madame, she wore Chanel No. 5, Marilyn Monroe's favorite. By changing the fragrances, only then did the characters begin to clearly distinguish themselves. Cannes Palme d'Or and Political Scapegoat. In 2011, 6 movies starring Jessica were released in theaters consecutively. This level of productivity was extremely rare, even in Hollywood. In practice, Jessica's face graced movie theaters all year round. Furthermore, most of the films received good reviews, and The Tree of Life, where she played Brad Pitt's wife, even won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. However, during this period when she was successfully establishing herself, Jessica unexpectedly became a scapegoat in American politics. It all started with the movie Zero Dark 30, in which she was the absolute protagonist. The story followed U.S. government agents tracking down Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the September 11th attacks, and Jessica took on the role of a CIA agent. However, just days before filming began, shocking news broke. Bin Laden had been killed in a dramatic U.S. military operation. Originally, the movie was supposed to end with the U.S. government failing in its search for bin Laden, but since reality took a 180-degree turn, the script had to be completely scrapped and entirely rewritten to end with an American victory. Despite the rushed script change, the film was praised for its high quality, and at the premiere, both Jessica's performance and the film itself were acclaimed. However, shortly after the premiere, the film's release was canceled. Investigations revealed evidence that the White House and the CIA had passed top-secret information to the film's director. At the time, the United States was on the eve of a presidential election, and it was alleged that the goal was to use the film to build President Obama's image as the hero who captured the terrorist of the decade, thus gaining an advantage in the elections. They even allowed the director to attend confidential meetings inaccessible to the general public and actively provided support, handing over top-secret documents separately. In the end, all of this was discovered, and the film's release was postponed until after the presidential elections. Ironically, this political controversy served as a massive promotional boost, causing audiences to flock to theaters, all because of rumors that they could see the assassination operation of the decade, backed by rigorous historical research. With this film, Jessica was even nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress. However, due to the political controversy, some Academy members declared a boycott, and the film did not win a single award in the major categories. The first Best Actress Oscar of Jessica's life crumbled bitterly, risking her own salary for a colleague. Jessica, who had involuntarily gotten involved in a political dispute, made headlines this time for making her own political statement. Only this time, it was in a very positive sense. Actress Octavia Spencer, with whom she had shown fantastic chemistry in the movie The Help. Upon happily reuniting as co-stars after several years, Jessica discovered a surprising fact. Octavia, who had even won an Oscar already, was receiving a salary 5 times lower than hers, who had not won the award. Jessica experienced firsthand the racial discrimination she had only vaguely heard about until then. Right around this time, Black actress Viola Davis, who had won the 4 major U.S. awards, made a public denunciation about discrimination in Hollywood, saying, "My salary was only a tenth of that of white actresses of the same level." Faced with this, Jessica immediately called the film's production company, "Match Octavia's salary to mine." When the production company hesitated, Jessica made a bombshell statement, "Then I won't be in the movie." She was willing to lose her entire salary and even risk her career for a colleague. In the end, after much deliberation, the production company accepted Jessica's demand and increased Octavia's salary 5-fold. This story only became known to the world a long time later, when Octavia tearfully revealed it during a public event. Andrew Garfield's tears. Octavia wasn't the only one brought to tears by Jessica. Andrew Garfield, famous for his role as Spider-Man, also shed unexpected tears because of Jessica. This happened during the filming of The Eyes of Tammy Faye, a movie that Jessica produced and starred in. Andrew played Jessica's husband in this film. One day in the middle of filming, Andrew received devastating news. His mother, who was battling pancreatic cancer, seemed to truly be in her final moments. Andrew wanted to spend those last moments with his mother, but according to Hollywood practices, once the filming period begins, the shooting schedule must be met, regardless of any personal circumstances. Since astronomical amounts of money and manpower are invested, a single day's delay in filming can cause hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, to evaporate. It is even said that Brad Pitt couldn't leave the set even after receiving news of his mother's passing during filming. However, Jessica broke this convention. Using her authority as a producer, she halted all filming and sent Andrew to his mother's side. The last moment with your mother cannot be bought with any amount of money. Jessica had to bear the costs of everyday filming, was halted alone as a producer, but thanks to this, Andrew was able to spend the final moments by his mother's side for about 10 days until her passing. They talked deeply so that there would be no regrets, and it is said that he said, "I love you" more times in those 2 weeks than in his entire life. After saying goodbye to his mother and returning to filming, Andrew gave his all in his performance, as if wanting to repay Jessica's thoughtfulness. Thus, the chemistry between Jessica and Andrew exploded on screen, and with this film, Jessica finally won the long-awaited first Best Actress Oscar of her life. Pure thoughtfulness, without expecting anything in return, ended up coming back as the greatest of rewards. Surrogacy controversy. However, around this time, an unexpected controversy arose around Jessica. It was the surrogacy case. In 2017, Jessica married Giancarlo, an Italian nobleman and executive of a large company. Since he belongs to a noble family with over 1,000 years of history, they held a luxurious wedding at the grand Italian mansion owned by her husband. And just 1 year after the wedding, the birth of a beautiful daughter was announced. However, the people around Jessica felt a strange sense of incongruity. Over the past year, no one had seen her pregnant even once. During the period when she should have been pregnant, she filmed 2 movies consecutively, showing off a slender figure with no apparent baby bump, and even performed dangerous skiing and ice skating scenes. This raised suspicions about the use of a surrogate. In Hollywood, the use of a surrogate is a highly sensitive issue. There is always criticism that the pain of pregnancy and childbirth is being bought with huge sums of money. Among the stars known to have used surrogates are Amber Heard, who fought a legal battle with Johnny Depp, Nicole Kidman, and Kim Kardashian. Of course, there are also stars who feel wronged, stating that it wasn't for convenience, but an unavoidable choice due to infertility or difficulties getting pregnant. However, since Jessica herself has never publicly stated that she used a surrogate, the true story behind it is only known to those involved. Today, we told the story of Jessica Chastain, known in our country as Goddess Cha, born to a 16-year-old single mother, surviving on shoplifting, suffering bullying at school, losing her younger sister shortly before graduating from college, going through a casting audition that bordered on sexual assault as soon as she took her first steps into society, and a woman who had to lose her first Oscar for getting involved in a political dispute. Even so, a woman who risked her own salary for a colleague and took on a loss of hundreds of thousands so that a colleague could be with his family in their final moments. And in the end, the woman who held the Best Actress trophy at the Oscars. Jessica Chastain's life in itself is already a movie.